My father's electricity got shut off at 8:47 this morning because I stopped paying his bills after he told 37 relatives at our Easter backyard gathering that I was just a guest in his house. The disconnect order had been scheduled for weeks. My autopay was the only thing keeping it from snapping shut. He called me in a panic about a mix-up with the electric company. There wasn't one. The disconnect notice was sitting on his kitchen counter. $247.38 past due. 3 months I'd been quietly covering while he played the perfect post-divorce dad with everything handled. For 3 years, my bank transfers have kept his life running. Mortgage assistance, car insurance, cable, even the monthly HVAC payment plan. He dismissed me as a guest, then expected my automatic payments to keep acting like I lived there. When I told him I'd canceled everything Sunday night, his voice went sharp. "You're overreacting." That word again. The same one he used when I was 12 and Jeremy got the bigger party. The same word he uses whenever I point out the obvious. Jeremy gets the hugs and praise for showing up with store-bought flowers, and I get the bills, the errands, the cleanup, and the silence. Yesterday, I paid for the food, $174.63 on my receipt, brought the wine, and stayed behind to scrub dishes while Dad wrapped an arm around Jeremy like he'd saved the holiday. So this morning, when Dad asked what he was supposed to do with the lights off, I kept my voice calm. I told him I was just a guest now, remember? He had no idea how much glue he'd just lost. Let me explain how we got to this point. When Dad divorced Mom 4 years ago, he moved into a house he couldn't really afford on one income. The mortgage payment was doable. Everything around it wasn't. Utilities, insurance, maintenance, and the "I'm totally fine" image he wanted everyone to see, so the gap got filled the same way it always had in our family. By me. It started as a one-time favor. "Could you help with the electric bill this month, just until I get settled?" Then it became the car insurance, then an HVAC payment plan he signed up for because the house needed it. Little problems turned into recurring ones, and recurring ones turned into autopay. By year 2, I was sending about $1,200 a month without anyone having to ask. Not because I had endless money, because I was the reliable one, the glue. The person who handled the unglamorous parts so Dad could keep smiling at family events like nothing was wrong. Dad never asked Jeremy for help, not once. Jeremy was figuring himself out, which was code for floating between couches and excuses while Dad protected him from anything that looked like responsibility. Jeremy got the long phone calls, the encouragement, the proud introductions. My son, the creative. I got the task lists and the quiet expectations. I was fixing everything for 3 years. The favoritism wasn't new, but the divorce made it feel almost mathematical. Jeremy got the emotional investment. I got the labor. Christmas morning, Jeremy would arrive with a cheap bottle of wine and somehow earn 20 minutes of Dad's full attention, talking about his latest project. I'd show up with gifts I actually planned and paid for, and then I'd coordinate with Dad's siblings, do the grocery run for the things he forgot, and clean up afterward. Jeremy got the credit for bringing the family together. I got the Venmo requests for groceries. Last Father's Day, Jeremy posted an Instagram photo of him and Dad at lunch, a lunch I paid for, with a caption about how grateful he was. People liked it. People commented. Dad beamed. That same week, I handled Dad's insurance paperwork after a minor fender bender, dealt with the bank when they flagged his account, and covered another shortfall with the same calm tone I always used. Jeremy brought flowers. I brought solvency. And it worked for so long because I was good at being invisible. I paid bills without making a speech. I fixed problems before Dad had to feel them. I didn't ask for credit. I just kept the machine running. In our family, reliable didn't mean respected. It meant convenient. I was the glue holding Dad's new life together. The problem with being invisible is that people start to believe you don't have limits. They start to believe you don't have choices. And once they believe that, they stop thinking about what happens when you stop. Easter Sunday started like most family gatherings, with me handling the logistics. Dad decided to host in his backyard, which meant I coordinated with my aunts about what to bring, picked up the ham he'd forgotten to order, and arrived 2 hours early to set up tables and chairs. 37 people were coming, extended family, a couple of Dad's friends, even neighbors he wanted to impress. I brought the food that actually mattered and the wine. Jeremy showed up fashionably late with a bouquet from a gas station and immediately became the center of attention. "Look what Jeremy brought," Dad announced, like those flowers had saved the holiday. But for once, I felt optimistic. Dad seemed genuinely happy to have everyone there. He introduced me to his neighbors, mentioned my job to his friends, even thanked me when I got the grill working after it refused to light. In front of all those witnesses, I let myself believe he might finally acknowledge who made hosting possible. I thought maybe this time would be different. The moment that changed everything happened in the kitchen around hour 3. I was washing dishes, again, while Jeremy held court on the patio, telling stories that had everyone laughing. Dad came in looking stressed. "We're running low on ice," he said. I didn't hesitate. I offered to drive to the store. Simple, helpful. The automatic reflex I'd had for years. That's when Dad turned to me with that expression I knew too well. The one that meant I was about to be put back in my place. "You don't need to do that," he said, loud enough for the relatives lingering near the kitchen to hear. I paused with a wet plate in my hands. Then he added, casually, like it was a normal thing to say about the person who'd been carrying the day. Dad looked right at me and said, "You're just a guest here." I drove home from that Easter backyard gathering with my hands steady on the wheel and my mind completely clear. For the first time in 3 years, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I pulled into my driveway, opened my banking app, and started canceling. Every automatic transfer, every recurring payment, every digital cord I'd quietly attached to keep Dad's life running without him having to think about it. Mortgage assistance, canceled. Car insurance, canceled. Cable, canceled. The HVAC payment plan, canceled. It took 11 minutes to undo 3 years of support. 11 minutes to turn myself from the invisible solution back into exactly what Dad had called me, a guest. I canceled every automatic payment that night. The next morning at 8:47, Dad called me in a panic. "The electricity is off," he said. "Did you mess with something? There's a notice here. $247.38 past due. I don't understand." I understood perfectly. The disconnect had already been scheduled. My Autopay failing was the trigger. That notice didn't appear because the universe was unfair. It appeared because the safety net disappeared. "There's no mix-up," I said, keeping my voice even. "My payment method isn't on your account anymore." He went silent for half a beat, then tried to shove the moment back into its usual place, where I fix things and he stays comfortable. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is," he snapped. I almost laughed because the timing was perfect. "Guests don't pay the electric bill," I said. Monday turned into a chorus of texts, fast, dismissive, and completely predictable. "Jeremy, Dad said you're upset about Easter." "Come on, man." "Mom, your father called. You're being dramatic about something that happened at a party." Jeremy again. "Seriously, stop making a big deal out of nothing. Dad didn't mean anything by it." Same script, same goal, shrink my boundary into a mood swing. I didn't respond. In my family, be reasonable had always meant be invisible. By Wednesday, the consequences stopped being theoretical. Notices started arriving. Cancellation language, late fee language, final warning language. Not emotional, not personal. Just systems doing what systems do when money stops showing up. Dad called that evening, confused but still trying to outsource. "Evan, there's something weird with my car insurance," he said. "They're saying my payment got canceled." "Did you change banks or something?" "I didn't change banks," I said. "Well, something's messed up," he insisted. "Can you call them tomorrow?" "No." A long pause. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, I'm not handling your bills anymore, Dad." Another pause, longer this time. "Since when?" "Since you told 37 people I was just a guest." By the end of the week, the rest of the infrastructure started groaning. The HVAC company left a voicemail about a missed payment. Another email came through about an assistance program lapsing. And the calls got sharper, less confused, more urgent. They still didn't understand what was happening. But I did. The power company disagrees. And for the first time, I let them sit in the silence I'd been filling for years. By the second week, Dad's confusion turned into something sharper. The power was back on. He'd finally paid the $247.38 himself after scrambling for a couple of days, but the broader pattern was impossible to ignore. Insurance notices, cable warnings, HVAC calls. The infrastructure of his independence was suddenly demanding money from the person who'd been enjoying it. That's when he escalated to the family network. Mom called Tuesday morning in her disappointed but reasonable voice, the one she used whenever she wanted me to shrink back into place. "Evan, your father explained what happened at Easter," she said. "He didn't mean anything by that comment. You know how he gets at parties, but letting his electricity get shut off? That seems extreme. I didn't turn off his electricity, I said. I stopped paying for it. Well, that's the same thing, isn't it? No, Mom, it's not. She sighed like I was being deliberately difficult. This is hurting the whole family. Jeremy is worried sick about his father. I almost smiled at the irony. The power company disagrees. Wednesday brought Jeremy himself. His tone wasn't smug or dismissive for once. It was uneasy. Evan, what's going on? He asked. Dad says you cut off his electricity over some comment at Easter. That doesn't sound like you. What does sound like me? I asked. A pause. I don't know, man. You're usually the reasonable one, the one who fixes things. I am fixing things, I said. I'm fixing the part where Dad gets to dismiss me in public while expecting me to subsidize his life in private. Jeremy went quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. How much were you paying Dad every month? That question hung there, heavy and overdue, because Jeremy had never once asked what Dad's life actually cost. He'd never wondered how the bills always got paid. He just accepted that they did. About $1,200, I said, for years, and for the first time Jeremy didn't have a comeback, just silence. By Thursday, I knew exactly where this was heading. Pressure, guilt, and a rewrite where I was the problem and Dad was the victim. So I did what I always did when things got messy. I documented, I opened my laptop and wrote a simple, professional email. No insults, no begging, just facts. I attached 3 years of bank records, every transfer, every payment, every quiet rescue, mortgage assistance, insurance premiums, utilities, the HVAC payment plan. The subject line was blunt on purpose. Since I'm just a guest, I CC'd Mom and Jeremy. Not to start drama, to establish the record. At the bottom I wrote one line, since I'm just a guest in Dad's home, I've discontinued all host-level financial responsibilities. Please adjust expectations accordingly. Then I hit send. The silence afterward wasn't confusion anymore. It was recognition. It was a family finally doing the math they'd avoided for years and realizing exactly who had been fixing everything the whole time. That email didn't start a fight, it started an audit. Within an hour, my phone started ringing, not with anger, but with shock. Because seeing about $1,200 a month as a sentence is one thing, seeing 3 years of transfers stacked line by line is something else entirely. When I totaled the recurring support I'd been covering, the number landed like a weight. $37,412. And that was just the predictable, scheduled stuff, the payments that made Dad's post-divorce life look seamless. It didn't even include the one-off rescues, last-minute shortfalls, can you spot me until Friday, or the quiet little gaps I filled so no one had to see him struggle. The bank records were brutal in their simplicity. Mortgage assistance, $22,400. Car insurance, $4,500. Utilities support, $3,200. Cable and internet, $3,000. HVAC payment plan, $4,312. Every transfer documented, every date recorded, every small favor that somehow became a system. The math didn't care about tone, it didn't care about intention, it couldn't be waved away as me being dramatic. It just sat there, cold and clean, showing exactly who had been paying for Dad's hosting privileges while being treated like a guest. And the part that mattered most wasn't even the attachments, it was the subject line. Since I'm just a guest. That's what I'd written when I sent it to Dad, with Mom and Jeremy CC'd, the way I'd promised myself I would. No drama, just the record. Then Dad tried to rewrite it. He didn't text, he didn't email back, he called 6 times and left 6 voicemails over the next few hours, each one shifting shape as he realized the facts weren't going away. Evan, I got your email. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I never meant, look, we need to talk. Then softer. Okay, maybe I should have been more grateful, but family doesn't keep score like this. Then sharper again. Your mother is upset. Jeremy doesn't understand. You're causing problems for everyone. And finally, the closest thing to an apology he could manage while still trying to make it my responsibility to fix. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry I said that. I didn't mean you were actually just a guest. You know your family. You know you matter. Can we please just fix this? 6 voicemails, not one offer to pay me back, not one sentence that sounded like accountability, just urgency, just damage control, just make this stop. Mom called that evening, and her voice was smaller than I'd heard it in years. Evan, I didn't know it was that much, she said. I thought you helped occasionally. $1,200 a month isn't occasionally, I said. A pause long enough that I could picture her doing the math for the first time. And the electricity, the notice, that was real? It was $247.38 past due, I said. That's what was sitting on his counter. Another pause. I think I understand now why you're upset, she said. Like the word guest had finally connected to the lights going out. Jeremy's call came last. No bluster, no, come on man, no, stop making a big deal out of it. Just a voice that sounded like someone seeing the same pattern from the outside for the first time. Jesus, he said, I had no idea. I know. $1,200 a month for years? Yeah. And Dad just let you? He didn't just let me, I said. He expected it. There's a difference. Jeremy went quiet, and when he finally spoke, it didn't sound like a threat or a lecture. It sounded like defeat. I can't even afford my own rent most months, he admitted. And there it was. The truth nobody wanted to say out loud. The golden child couldn't save him. The person who got the hugs and praise didn't have the capacity to do the job I'd been doing invisibly. That's when I made the last move in the receipt drop. Dad had called me just a guest in front of 37 people, so I forwarded the same email, subject line and attachments unchanged, to the people who witnessed it. One sentence in the body, surgical, calm. Since I'm just a guest, I'm done fixing everything. I CC'd every relative who heard him call me just a guest. The responses came in within hours, and they split exactly the way I expected. One aunt replied, I had no idea you were covering all that, I'm sorry. Another cousin wrote, you just embarrassed your father. One side wasn't horrified by what Dad said. They were horrified that I'd let anyone see the consequences. How could you embarrass him like this? This should have stayed private. Family doesn't air dirty laundry. Same message, different words, protect the image, not the person who's been paying for it. The other side sounded different. Not loud, just honest. I had no idea you were supporting him. Good for you for finally putting it in writing. I was wondering how he could afford that house. That split told me something important. If I kept chasing approval, I'd end up right back where I'd been, fixing everything, quietly, so everyone else could stay comfortable. So I prepared for the long game. On Tuesday, I opened a new checking account. Clean slate, no shared access, no stored autopay templates, no accidental login, saves that could be used to drag me back into Dad's financial chaos. I moved my pay deposits, updated my cards, and made sure every canceled payment stayed canceled. Then I locked down the obvious risks, changed passwords on my banking and billing portals, turned on 2FA everywhere it was offered, removed any authorized user-style access that didn't need to exist, set my phone to silence unknown numbers after hours. If they wanted a reaction, they were going to have to live without my money and my immediate attention. By Wednesday, the extended family dynamics got interesting. Apparently, there was a group chat I'd never been invited to, the one where keeping the peace usually means blaming the person who finally stops bleeding. This time, it wasn't working. People were asking questions that should have been asked years ago. How was Dad's post-divorce transition so smooth? Why were his bills always paid on time? Why did his lifestyle never reflect the financial reality of starting over at 53? For the first time, the invisible infrastructure was visible. By Thursday, I met with my financial advisor, not for drama, for protection, because I could see the next moves coming, escalating pressure, guilt campaigns, and the classic attempt to reframe my boundary as cruelty. She reviewed the records, then said one sentence that hit harder than any family lecture. You've been enabling, not helping, there's a difference. Together we drafted a short formal letter, calm, factual, and impossible to twist. It stated that my financial support had been voluntary, contingent on basic respect, and that respect had been publicly withdrawn. No threats, no insults, just a line in the sand. Document everything, she told me. Save every voicemail, screenshot every message. If this escalates, you want a clean paper trail showing you acted reasonably. On Friday, more calls came, some from relatives, some from people I didn't expect, even a couple of Dad's friends who somehow got my number. Everyone wanted to talk it through or find a solution that works for everyone. But I knew what that phrase meant in my family. A solution that works for everyone is usually a solution where I go back to being the glue, and everyone pretends the Easter comment never happened. So I didn't negotiate, I didn't argue, I didn't explain myself into exhaustion. I waited. And waiting was the hardest part because action feels like control, while silence feels like standing still with targets forming. But every new crisis message proved the same thing. I wasn't imagining things. I was finally reacting appropriately. And for the first time in years, I let that be their problem. 3 weeks later, Jeremy called with a request that sounded more like a plea. "Look, Mom wants everyone together next weekend," he said. "Just brunch, nothing big. Dad promised he won't bring up the money thing if you just show up." "The money thing," I repeated. "You know what I mean," Jeremy said quickly. "Can't we just have one normal family gathering?" I almost laughed because he still thought this was about hurt feelings instead of a 3-year system collapsing. He still didn't understand there was no back to normal when normal had been built on me staying invisible. But I said yes. Not to make peace, to finish the conversation. I brought 3 years of receipts to brunch. Mom picked a restaurant with white tablecloths and mimosas, the kind of place where people keep their voices down and problems get handled with tight smiles. She'd invited a few relatives too. Not 37 like Easter, but enough that nobody could pretend this was private. Dad was already there when I arrived, sitting up straight like he'd been coached. Polite, careful. Jeremy sat beside him, radiating nervous energy, the way someone does when they're hoping a grenade turns out to be a balloon. "Evan," Dad said as I sat down, "I'm glad you came. I think we all just want to move past this." "Move past what?" I asked. Dad's jaw tightened. "The misunderstanding from Easter." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just set a folder on the table between the coffee cups and the silverware. Not thick, not dramatic, just clean documentation. "There was no misunderstanding," I said. "You called me just a guest in front of 37 people. I believed you." Mom jumped in with her mediator voice. "Can't we just agree everyone could have handled things better and moved forward?" I opened the folder anyway. "Mom," I said, calm, "I'm going to show you what you've been calling too much." Overreacting? The power company disagrees. The statements were organized by year, clean, clear, impossible to dismiss as emotions. I spread the pages across the tablecloth like I was dealing cards, and I watched the energy at the table change, because paper has a way of turning denial into silence. "This," I said, tapping the totals, "is what just a guest was covering." Dad's face drained of color as he read. Mom's mimosa stopped halfway to her mouth. Jeremy leaned forward, finally seeing the pattern, not as complaints or resentment, but as a system, a financial arrangement that had been quietly sustaining Dad's entire post-divorce life. "For 3 years," I continued, "I made sure Dad's life looked seamless. Mortgage assistance, insurance, utilities, payment plans he signed without checking what he could actually afford. I covered gaps, I handled crises, I kept the machine running. My voice stayed level, professional, like I was presenting a report instead of dismantling a family myth. I was the glue holding Dad's independence together," I said, "but glue only works when both sides want it to stick. The moment Dad decided I was just a guest, the adhesive failed." One of the relatives at the table made a small, involuntary sound, like the truth had landed in their lap. Jeremy finally spoke, and his voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Is that 37,000? he asked. 37,412, I said. "That's the part that's easy to count." Dad tried to salvage control with a familiar phrase. "Evan, I never meant family helps family. You know I would have done the same for you." "Would you?" I asked, still calm. "Because in 3 years, you never once asked what this cost me. You never offered to pay me back. You never acknowledged it until the lights went out." I let the silence sit there long enough to become uncomfortable. Long enough for people at nearby tables to glance over and then pretend not to. "Dad," I added, "reliable people have limits, and guests don't pay host-level expenses." Mom's eyes looked unfocused, like she was doing math she'd refused to do for years. Jeremy looked like he was seeing a completely different family than the one he believed he grew up in. Finally, Dad spoke again. Quiet this time, not defensive, not charming, just smaller. "I didn't know it was that much," he said. "I mean, I knew you helped, I just didn't add it up." "I know," I said. "You didn't add it up because you didn't want to see what the total meant." Dad swallowed. His shoulders dropped a fraction. "I depended on you," he admitted, and it sounded like it hurt to say out loud. "For 3 years. There it was. Not a private apology, not a text, not damage control behind closed doors, a public acknowledgement in front of family. Jeremy stared at the papers again, then at Dad. then at me. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked. "All those times you asked if I could help with something small, and you were covering everything," I finished. "I was covering everything." Jeremy's face tightened like he was trying to find a way out of the truth. "I can't cover what you were covering," he said finally, honest for once. "I can barely handle my own rent some months." "I know," I said. "That's why this ends the way it ends." He looked at Dad, then back at me. "But I can help," he said, the words coming out slower like they were new. "I can take one thing. The car insurance maybe, or I can start contributing monthly, something real, and I can stop acting like this is your job." It wasn't a miracle, it wasn't a full redemption. It was the first time in my adult life Jeremy didn't automatically assume I would fix everything. The conversation that followed wasn't about forgiveness, it was about reality, about Dad living within his actual means instead of mine, about responsibilities being named out loud instead of silently assigned to me, about the fact that the glue had been a person, and that person had choices. And for the first time in years, sitting at a table with my family, I wasn't the default solution. I was just a son. Not the glue, not the guest. Just someone with boundaries, finally enforced. 6 months later, everything was different. Not dramatically different, quietly different. The kind of change that happens when truth gets more space than tradition, and people finally learn to ask instead of assume. Dad started calling before family events instead of assigning me a role I never volunteered for. "Would you be willing to bring wine?" Not "pick up wine." Small words, big difference. Jeremy kept his promise. He took over the car insurance payments. Not the full about $1,200 a month I'd been covering for years, but a real contribution that forced him to stop pretending Dad's bills were theoretical. Dad's lifestyle got smaller, more realistic, more honest. He started saying, "I can't afford that right now," instead of finding creative ways to make it my problem. Family dinners felt lighter too. Less like performances where everyone pretended the invisible labor didn't exist. When I helped clean up, it was because I chose to, not because it was silently assigned the moment I walked in. Mom stopped using "you know how he is" as a blanket excuse. The receipts had done what arguments never could, they made the math undeniable. Last month, Dad called to thank me for something I did during the divorce, a crisis I handled that he never acknowledged at the time. "I should have seen it then," he said. "I should have said something." "You're saying something now," I told him, and he was, finally. The best part wasn't the gratitude, though. It was the fact that I didn't need it anymore. I'd learned the difference between being useful and being used, between being family and being the family ATM, between fixing everything and choosing when to help. Jeremy still showed up with gas station flowers sometimes, but now he also showed up with effort, with responsibility, with the understanding that gatherings don't organize themselves and bills don't pay themselves. The glue was still there when it mattered, but now it was a choice, not an expectation. Respect came first, and if anyone ever tried to call me just a guest again, they'd be saying it to someone who actually lives like one. Now when I visit, I'm family. Not the glue, not the ATM, just Evan, by choice.